Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
3, 2, 1, and we're back. Julie Harris. We are standing here in a hotel room with no sound deadening. So if it sounds, crappy, weird, that is the way it goes. Mm-hmm. We're standing, looking out the window. And what exactly are we looking at? We're in Blaine, Washington State. Let me just put this in perspective for all those who are following us along on our sojourn. That's a fancy way for saying trip. You can follow us on Instagram at Tim and Julie Harris. And also, we have a website that is documenting our whole trip that is going to be embedded into the show description for today's podcast. We've been doing that over the last few podcasts. A lot of you guys are enjoying our travel pictures, and we're enjoying sharing them with you and sharing this whole journey with you. And the website also is describing where we're going next in the country, and specifically where we're going to be stopping. We love getting the travel suggestions. We're getting a ton of suggestions. If you have any where we should be going, especially after you see the map, definitely message us through Instagram. And that's great. And we're really, truly enjoying running into some of you. So if you happen to be in one of the towns that we're going to be passing through, especially when we're staying the night, please do seriously consider dropping us a message through Instagram, and we'd love to connect with you. And we are in Blaine, Washington today. So if you want to think about where that is on a map, Blaine, Washington is, I'm quite certain you could not go any further north in the United States, or rather, let me put it a different way. We could not be any further away from our home in Puerto Rico, except
without
if we're
going to Hawaii.
Well, okay, let me put it a different way, just to make it really interesting.
Sure.
Puerto Rico is farther down in the hemisphere than Hawaii is. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, we are the furthest north that we possibly could be and still be in the United States.
Except Alaska, but yes.
Yeah, there you go. Except Alaska, of course. But
yes, and we know that because we were talking to one of our great staff members on the way up here, and just kind of we're on autopilot, and it literally said checkpoint into Canada that was your next exit, and at the same time it said freeway ends. And I don't think they probably would have just let us in that easily, but apparently the Canadian border is closed, but we narrowly missed that, or we would be talking to you from being marooned up there.
And nearly drove into Canada.
That's right.
Right, exactly.
So shout out to our Canadian clients, because we're closer to you than normal.
And it is a really incredible part of the world, too. We got here last night. Well, first of all, because it's summer and where this town is situated on planet Earth, they have this time of year, very, very long days. And the sun didn't set here till what time? 9:30?
9:30, which was weird for us.
And in Puerto Rico, the sun sets at what time?
7.
Yeah, so it's like, oh my gosh. Then we thought, I remember Earth science from the 6th grade. You get longer daylight the further northern you go in certain times of the year. So we kind of figured that one out quick.
Yes, but maybe people get more stuff done up here. I don't know.
So while we're here, and we're very excited about this, today actually we're going to be meeting with Glenn Sanford, and he is the founder of EXP Realty. We're meeting with Glenn in a few hours. We've got a lot of great questions that we've prepared for him, and we're actually going to share with you some of the questions that we're going to be asking Glenn. And maybe, I don't know. I doubt if he'll ask to see the questions ahead of time. Some people do, and some people edit the questions. And frankly, if anyone ever gives me questions to ask, we don't do a lot of interviews, but when we do, we never use the questions they give us to ask. And sometimes, honestly, Julie and I spent a lot of time on writing these questions down because we wanted to really make this a great interview. Glenn's been interviewed a lot, and his interviewers are usually asking the exact same questions. And we wanted to break free of that mold. And also the other thing that you guys will discover is on a podcast versus being filmed, people have a tendency to be a lot more free-flowing in what they're saying and what they're willing to talk about. I don't know. I mean, Julie and I certainly feel that once a camera's on you, for some reason, you lose your ability to think and be yourself. And so hopefully just by doing a podcast, audio only, and by asking him some of these questions, it should be thought-provoking. It'll be beneficial to all of you. That interview should be live tomorrow or the following day, but we are doing it today. But we're going to share with you some of the questions that we have prepared. And just before we do, I want to remind all of you, do you remember the code, the tech code?
47372.
No, that's the old one.
No, I don't then.
47372? Oh, that is the new one. You're
Okay.
right. Yes. So if you're interested, since we're talking with Glenn Sanford today, if you're interested in learning more about EXP Realty and why you might consider joining EXP Realty with Julie and I and be a partner with us, please do text EXP to 47372. Text the letters EXP to 47372. So in essence, today's podcast and tomorrow's podcast are sponsored by EXP indirectly, of course. So just go ahead and text the letters EXP to 47372. And when you do, we're going to text you back a link, and that link is going to then give you information not just on EXP, but also on why you should consider joining EXP with Julie and I as your sponsor. Yes, to be clear, Julie and I are formally applying for the job of being your EXP sponsor. So just go ahead and text EXP to 47372. And when you do, we're going to text you back a link to a website. The website's called Why Libertas. If you want to go directly, it's whylibertas.com. And then you can, the first thing to do is watch the 2 videos. There's actually more than that, but watch the video that is at the top of the site. And then that automatically connects to in the next video. So then watch both of those videos and then click around on the site. And I think you'll have all your questions answered, and you will feel the same level of energy, enthusiasm, and excitement that we did 2.5 years ago when we aligned with EXP. So just go ahead and do that now. Text EXP to 47372. So those of you who don't know who Glenn Sanford is, I already said he's the founder of EXP. But what you might not know, and I think personally I find this interesting, is that Glenn, and I'm going to talk about, hopefully have him talk about this a bit today and in the interview, is back in like the real estate crash back in 07, 08, if I remember correctly, and I think I've heard him say this before, is that he was not in the best of financial positions. He had a number of real estate teams. His real estate teams, he was doing the expansion model. He was with Keller Williams. He was, his groups were selling a lot of houses. Everything was successful. And then obviously everything came to a screeching halt. And through that moment of change, he had an epiphany, and that epiphany was EXP. But here's the part that I find to be extremely interesting, just from a whole bunch of different perspectives. So since 2007 till 2021, the guy has gone from, I don't know what his financial situation was in 2007, 2008. I just expressed the all I know, but I do know now that he's a billionaire, and not just a single billionaire, but a multi-billionaire. And for somebody in not just their lifetime, but in such a relatively short period of time, to go from zero to billionaire, in my mind, is just incredible. There aren't too many people that have done that. Certainly not too many people have done that in real estate. Certainly not too many people have done that coming up with a whole new idea for real estate. It's akin, in my mind, the only parallels you could really truly find for that would be looking at technology companies, which is what truly EXP is. You can't necessarily find a similar success story in the typical franchise model. But you look at Jeff Bezos, who I guess went to space yesterday.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
That's something.
Yeah, exactly. Elon Musk. I mean, these guys are all technologists, and certainly Glenn is as well. But yeah, I mean, Julie, as I was talking, what were you thinking? Because frankly, you and I spent a lot of time on these questions.
Yes. And as you said, you never know how it's going to go. Sometimes we have
Exactly.
lots of great questions and it just takes a turn.
Mm-hmm.
They will all be listening to that interview, I think, tomorrow. So stay posted for that. But what I was thinking is that it's such a micro percentage of anyone who becomes a billionaire in their lifetime, much less in 14, 15 years.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. And there's a lot of stories of people who, for a flash, made it and then lost it immediately, versus having the great trajectory of year over year, very consistent growth. So I think it really is remarkable, and I'm looking forward to meeting Glenn.
Assuming I'm successful at asking these questions and he feels comfortable with answering the questions completely, then we're going to, what I really like to get out of the interview, my personal focus, or what I'd really like to experience for selfish reasons, frankly, is I'd really like to know what goes on when you go from, what happens when you become a billionaire. Like, I'm not suggesting you all of a sudden get some sort of, golden ticket and you get some sort of, peek behind the curtain or any of those Mickey Mouse sort of mythical things. But I'm curious what happens in the way you think and if your perspective on life changes. Because if you think about it, like if you're, millionaire, okay, congratulations. You have 5 million, that's great. 10 million, that's great. It's not until you get into like 20, 30, 40 million that you really start to see a difference because like, I know this guys, this sounds ridiculous, but the reality of it is that it's not that difficult in the United States to have a net worth between 1 and 5 million if you buy a house in the right area, truthfully.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, you can buy real estate, and if you just buy real estate and you just laboriously invest, even if you're not a huge wage earner, you're going to probably end up a hell of a lot more, better off than you think you are because of real estate. So I get that. But to go from somebody who has, essentially somebody who's a billionaire has really no limitations on what they can do and experience in life, and no limitations on anything. I mean, we just were mentioning Jeff Bezos went to space. I mean, now Jeff Bezos is the world's richest man, I believe, right now, like 100 billion, or maybe it's even more than that.
But that's a great demonstration. You can pursue your ideas and develop things without going, well, I do that, but I can't afford it. I do that, but I've got to hire a bunch of people. Right. I do that, but I got to find the technology. You don't have those issues anymore.
So you're getting at it. Thank you for helping me drill down. So you look at, for example, the mindset that it takes, if you want to use that overused word, to become a billionaire. Once you've achieved that, where does your mind go, right?
Right. What motivates you then?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the reason I was bringing up Bezos as an example, and you clarified it for me. I mean, okay, why? What the hell? Let's go to space. I mean, exactly.
I know.
It's
and
not.
And maybe I'll take a few of my friends to space.
And it's funny too. I have to say, the generation. So Glenn is 54 or 55, and if you look at, for example, how the baby boomers were when they became really, really fabulously, famously wealthy, they all sort of tried to basically become 1970s style rock stars.
Right.
And they all wanted to make it about themselves. And we can just focus on real estate for that matter. If you look at, for example, just all the real estate leaders that Julie and I grew up with, who were all a generation older than us, or maybe even more than that, these baby boomers, they, Dave Liniger was flying hot air balloons and all these other, big ego. It's something something in the baby boomer generation that made it so that they thought that once they reached a certain level of success, that they had to sort of become these parodies, these almost like, rich guy type things. Whereas Generation X, our generation and Glenn's generation, we're not like that.
No.
We're way more subdued.
And why is that? Is that because marketers have ignored us because we're such a tiny generation and we didn't have that impetus to have that kind of, show? Is that because we've all come of age before the advent of things like TikTok, like our generation under us? I don't know why that is. I think it's interesting. I think you're right about that, is that you don't see a lot of, 45 to 55, 60-year-olds having that same kind of
not
flash.
60s definitely baby boomers, but people in their baby boomers starts to tick off when you basically cross about late 50s. But I think the real reason, if you want to know the truth, is because being wealthy, being a millionaire, being a decamillionaire, having 100 millions, having a billion, it's not, and I know this sounds insane, but it's really not that rare anymore. And back when a lot of these guys were coming up, the previous generation, it was rare. There were no, I remember this is.
Well, it's because it's all pre-tech company, I think. There probably was less.
Well, it's also inflation too. Sure. So, I mean, it's also all these things factor into it. But back when there didn't used to be so many billionaires. We publish reports on our website talking about the number of billionaires in the world, and there are just a ton of them. And there's more billionaires getting formed, every year. But look, I know these thoughts and these experience, what we're sharing with you guys sounds almost unobtainable, but that goes back to my original point. I mean, remember Glenn, if I'm remembering history correctly, and I'm going to hopefully talk about this with him today, was not in the best of financial ways, less than, 15 years ago. And the reality of it is now he's a billionaire. So that to me tells me that all of you and all of us, if we chose to, could also create something else that delivers value. And let's just, address this from a populist perspective, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people think that there's an unjust distribution of wealth in the world, and we're not going to talk about that. But here's what I am going to talk about. Look what Glenn has done. Look at the goodwill he's done in the world. And on not even just like an opaque way, in a very overt way. Look what he's done for so many other people. And as a result of him being of service to so many other people, that's the reason that he's basically been able to become a billionaire. And I'm talking about creating opportunity for all the 59,000, soon to be 100,000, soon to be 200,000, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 million agents that are associated with EXP globally. Look what the opportunity he created for himself. Now, I do remember this very distinctly from an interview I watched with him, and I hopefully will remember this today. As he said, there's two things agents don't do well: save money for retirement and pay their taxes. Mm-hmm. And he said he wanted to create basically a foolproof system that essentially covered agents for their, obviously their preordained deficiencies, right?
Yeah, which I think is amazing and absolutely true. We know that from hundreds of thousands of coaching calls.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean those are probably the two most concerning factors about not just like up and coming agents, but you and I have known super, high end top producers that got behind on their taxes, didn't have enough money to save for it, and it really set them back.
And that, it's funny when you and I bring this up sometimes, because what we're doing is we're just basically shattering the myth that selling real estate makes you rich.
Yeah.
Selling real estate does not make you rich, people. It's what you do with the profit that comes from selling real estate. And those two things do not necessarily go hand in hand. And if you think you do, you're never going to make enough profit to become rich. I just kind of spun that around. Hopefully you understand. Just because you sell a lot of houses, just because everybody knows your name, just because you're to what Julie said, you're a TikTok real estate rock star, and does not mean crap when it comes to actual profit and your ability to reinvest that money. Because what typically happens is even when agents are successful, what they'll tend to do is spend the money on dumb things to make themselves appear more successful than they actually are. And then, because what they've essentially bought into is fame. In other words, they've chose having the appearance of being successful and famous, and maybe they are successful and famous in their micro markets, but they've bought into the idea that they'd rather have those experiences than be rich, where their money works for them and they no longer work for their money. And this industry society nowadays just feeds into that. It's a constant stream, an IV that's tapped right into the vein of ego that basically is filling agents with more need for more recognition from strangers. And that makes you broke. Straight up, that'll make you broke.
Yeah, but what's cool about what Glenn has done is he has built a model that largely cures that.
But he also hasn't done it on his personality, honestly.
Not at all.
He hasn't made it so that it's, I'm the omnipresent, all-seeing, Oz. I am completely pulling all the levers and controls. When you think of EXP Realty, you think of a brand. You think of EXP Realty. You don't necessarily immediately think of Glenn Sanford, and that's something to position yourself as to do what he's done and not have an ego that's so out of whack that he wants to make himself, flying around the world in a freaking balloon with his logo all over it. That is, to me, something that's exceptionally extraordinary.
Absolutely.
And I think, hopefully, it's a role model for future generations to basically model after, is that at the end of the day, guys, Glenn is a billionaire. He is one of the world's wealthiest men. I believe he's one of the four. Here's just to put it in perspective. I believe in the world right now, there's at least 400 billionaires, because if I remember correctly, Glenn is one of the. I know for a fact he's on the Forbes list, but I remember preparing for today's interview that I was looking to see where he was, and I believe he's between 300 and 400. Now that to me is insane. I mean, and I mean that in the best of ways. That there's at least 300 people or 350 people that have more billions than Glenn does. And it's because why? It's because they're providing value. They're giving something. They're creating value to people that, as a result, and is in such abundance, the value he's creating, that it's essentially it's made him wealthy. And that, at the end of the day, is the formula for why somebody is rich. At the end of the day, it's because, and truly rich, where their money works for them and they no longer work for their money. It's because of the fact that they have created a product or a service, kind of the same thing, that other people are willing to pay for in abundance. Overwhelming value, right. And if you don't have what you want in life, it's because you haven't bridged that gap. You don't have what you want in life probably because you have not yet figured out a way to provide overwhelming value and abundance to enough other people that they would be willing to give you their money in exchange for what it is that you have for sale. And that ultimately is, again, it's a problem with real estate, because real estate in general is a transactional based business. But for agents that align with EXP, EXP, people ask me this occasionally. It's very rare. They'll say, EXP is a recruiting model. Agents don't sell real estate there. That's a bunch of hooey. If you look at statistically in some of the major markets in the United States, EXP is number one in terms of transaction and volume. Number two or number three. EXP agents, people that are coming to EXP, are generally speaking already at the pinnacle of their careers or on their way to being at the pinnacle of their careers. And they're more business minded because they say, I want to focus on selling real estate and I want to make immediate money with the transactional income. And this EXP thing has then created long-term wealth building through revenue share and through stock awards. Those three thoughts, and there's so many other benefits with EXP, but those three thoughts alone, I remember when that clicked in my mind in late 2018, that was a game changer.
Absolutely.
So you want to share with them some of these questions?
Yeah, well, I think, we did a whole series of shows, I believe it was last week, about EXP. Okay, so if you're wondering about at the details, you can go back and get caught up on that. And one of the things that we didn't discuss last week is what happens to EXP in a recession. It's had such outrageous growth year after year after year.
You wrote that. Where's that question?
Right here.
I love the question. Oh, it's number 3. Oh, yeah. That's an awesome question.
I mean, I think that's a valid question. I think that, the bigger question is what happens to our real estate boom that we're experiencing right now in a recession. But how would EXP be affected? So I'm interested in his take on that.
I have an answer, but I'm going to wait for him to answer. But I have a feeling his answer is
But we're going to ask it. We're going to try to anyway.
Okay, I like this question. We're going to start out with some softball questions. Julie wrote all these down, by the way. Did you write these down in a specific order? Or
They're rather escalating towards more, I don't know, kind of. I mean, these are the business questions. This is about EXP projections. Then we've got some closing questions, some Glenn questions.
Your first question's nice, a softball question.
On purpose?
I'm getting to know you. What are you working on now that you are most inspired by, business and personal? I like that question. And the second question you had, what is the biggest challenge or threat to real estate market that no one is talking about? Did you write that question down that I thought of that was basically if you had to go to someone for business advice? Okay, that was a good question.
Level.
And then the next question, share with them the genesis behind some of these other questions.
Well, so we have a little bit of mindset getting to know a billionaire that came from walking in your shoes.
Yep.
So I think that's going to be interesting to see how he thinks at the level he's at now. So, for example, outside of developing EXP, which obviously he's doing actively, what are you irrationally passionate about? I like to see what makes people tick, what they think about. We just talked about this one. Agents are famous for not paying their taxes, not saving money. Revenue share and stock awards can solve both. Where else should agents invest their money? Let's say that somebody's already in EXP and enjoying those benefits. They totally understand the model. What would he suggest other than obviously buying more EXPI stock?
I don't know if that's a good question, to be honest with you.
Why is that?
Well, it's because he's the CEO of a publicly traded company, and I don't think
that's what he's going to say.
Well, no, I would, if I were him, this is what I would try to steer free of that question. I'd probably say buy real estate or something. But in that question in particular, because of the position he is in the world, being a CEO of a public, or not CEO, sorry, Jason Guessing is, sorry, Jason. But being, the founder of a publicly traded company, for him to answer a question on investment advice, probably.
Well, that's probably too far.
Yeah, we'll skip that one up. All right.
Okay. But the inflation question I think is interesting because that's on everybody's mind. What is your perspective on inflation? Is it transitory, as we're hearing in the news a lot? What effect will it have on the housing market?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yes. And I'm working on a podcast all about inflation and that kind of thing. So that's going to play right into my outlines. This will be interesting. What popular or trendy idea in real estate is potentially hurting agents right now?
All right. So we have other questions. Hopefully you guys are enjoying these. I'm really looking forward to some of these answers. Oh, this is a good one, right? So in business school, we learned about the stages of product maturity, how a new product or model evolves, innovators, early adopters, early majority, and late majority. Where do you think EXP is in the stage of development? How much growth is there to go? And that you and I talked about that for probably an hour in the car when we were driving here. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I want to talk about what we decided, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
Well, but that might be something for our listeners to look up a little bit. It's really, there's lots of different charts and graphs, but essentially when something new is being adopted, there's a bell curve, right? There's just like this, curve to the top of an egg, if you will. And in the beginning, the only people that even know about it are known as innovators. That's a kind of smallish percent. And then you've got early adopters, right? So if you think about something that's not real estate, maybe like an Apple product or something like that, your early adopters are the people who stand in line for the next iPhone, or when it was first out, they stood in line for days. Those are your early adopters.
Well, and Julie, just to throw something in there too, the early adopters are the ones that are basically willing to be your live beta testers, right?
Yes, they're risk takers.
They'll overpay for a product that has faults because they want to be early
part
adopters.
Of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they do tend to be contributors. They get the bugs out. They're not afraid of adopting something that maybe isn't 100% polished yet. So that's kind of interesting.
I'm not going to be able to keep my mouth shut, right? So here, in my opinion, is innovators. If you look at EXP, basically when EXP had probably less than 1,000 agents, that was in the innovation stage, and then you started seeing the early adopters. And I personally think we're either midway through the early adopter phase with EXP Realty, or we're about 3/4 of the way through. That's what it feels like to me. because what you're starting to see in many major markets, like you and I, it's so cool. All these agents and people we've been seeing on our trip. Isn't it been wonderful, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great
been
to
so
see
cool to run
in person.
into podcast listeners, and then people say to us, "You guys said this and this," and I'm like, "We did? Okay." That was smart.
Well, we didn't even mention the Kenmore's office, which is just amazing in Kennewick, Washington, where we just left. I mean, that was fantastic to see their passion project, what they put together, and the result of all their hard work. So,
coolest real estate office ever.
I think so.
Yeah,
seriously,
definitely.
Kudos to them.
Yeah. Well, so we were anyway meeting with all of you, and it's fun to share your experiences, whether you're associated with EXP Realty or not. Most of you are coaching clients at this point. And by the way, if you want to learn more about a coaching program, just text the word success to 47372. Text the word success to 47372. The coaching program, guys, is your A to Z solution for building your real estate business, especially if you're finally ready to focus on becoming a listing agent, which if you're not yet ready to really accept the fact that being a buyer's agent prominently or primarily is the road to futility, then frankly, you're going to not have a very bright future.
Yes.
Really, honestly. Guys, you got to be accepting the fact that focus all your best energies every day on becoming a listing agent. I get the buyers, working with buyers can bridge the income gap, but put all your strengths to becoming a listing agent, because that's where you get consistency of income. That's where you get consistency of the ability to save, invest, and become rich. Being on a buyer's agent, it's going to always keep you on the roulette wheel of ups and downs in income. And this is a special note for all of you new agents. Don't think you have to wait to become a listing agent. You can become a listing agent the second the ink is dry on your license. So text the word success to 47372. So in my opinion, where we're at with the EXP is essentially in the early adopters phase, because when you go to some of these markets like we've been in, like we were in Boise, and in Boise there were less than 400 EXP agents total.
Right.
So if you're in Boise, Idaho, you're like, you might be like, oh, I think so-and-so went to EXP and I saw an EXP sign. And
you're kind of EXP curious at this point.
Now, for those of you who are in markets like that, I want you to really listen to what I'm saying. If you were to get off your duffs and you were to do what Julie and I are doing and traveling around to see other major markets, you would also see when traveling through, say, for example, Dallas or Austin or some of these other bigger metro areas, that there are tons of EXP agents. So just like at one point, I remember when Julie and I were selling real estate in the 90s, Keller Williams was like, people thought it was a country band. Matter of fact, wasn't there a country band called Keller Williams?
I was something close to that.
Yeah, it was really close. Anyway, so we used to run into all the, Keller Williams was starting to really take off, and everyone was like, Keller Williams, and most of the agents that went to Keller Williams were initially with RE/MAX. I'm with RE/MAX. And Julie and I were with RE/MAX. I'm not going to this Keller Williams country band. What the hell's Keller Williams, Do we get a guitar when we join? Yeah. And then what happened is that over that time, basically Keller Williams became the world's largest real estate brokerage. So it went from, but the early adopters, some of the people that are still with Keller Williams, and some of them aren't, they were the ones that got in before everyone knew what it was. They were willing to get past the country music, question, and they're willing to stick it out. And some of them have become, I'm thinking of our friends Linda and Jim McKissick, for example.
Great example.
They became very successful within the Keller Williams world. And I think, they were definitely they were early adopters. They weren't innovators; they were early adopters. But you went to Columbus, Ohio, for example, in the 90s, where Julie and I sold real estate. There was no Keller Williams. And they came to Keller Williams. They stayed at our house when they were looking for agents to buy franchises. And there were no Keller Williams offices. And they were there kicking down doors and talking to people and, burning the candle at both ends. And over time, they, very much got paid for all their efforts. But they were the early adopters in Columbus, Ohio, even though back in Texas, in Austin, for example, where Keller Williams had gotten started, where Gary had started Keller Williams, Keller Williams is doing great. So Linda and Jim had the foresight of having been in Austin, seeing that the idea is fantastic. In that era, Keller Williams was probably the best real estate brokerage business model. Now, in our humble opinion, EXP is. But when you looked at back in the 90s, it made sense when you went to Austin to see what could happen in Columbus. So they got off their butts. Where were they from originally? They weren't from Ohio.
I want to say something like Missouri or Arkansas or somewhere in there, somewhere in the middle of the country. I can't remember now.
They have slight accents.
Yeah,
like
Little Rock, maybe.
Yeah,
something
maybe
like that.
Yeah, maybe. But they had the foresight of realizing, well, you know what, this could happen in the Midwest, and of course it did. And that is what's happening with EXP. And when we go to Boise and we hear people say to us, well, there's only 350 or 400 EXP agents.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
It's better than being on the other end of the curve where it's like, I'm kind of late to the party.
Too many. Yeah.
And I think that some people are quick to say, well, that would have been great to get in early. This is early. It's still early.
But isn't that the thing? I mean, in my mind goes back to the the future you versus the present you, right? The current you. And it's like, if there are aspects of your life that aren't, like, Julie, what are aspects of your life right now that you'd like to kick past Julie in the ass for not having actually paid better attention to?
Well, that's an on-the-spot question. I don't know. I could always go to the health thing. I could always be working out harder and be more consistent.
How?
I don't know.
How many squats holding a 40-pound dumbbell or kettlebell did you do today? 200?
Yes, but I still would like to be able to maintain an 8-minute mile on the treadmill. I really would.
Okay.
But that's maybe just a personal.
But is there anything else? Because I'm answering in my head the same way you just did.
I'm tempted to say we would have been involved with EXP earlier, maybe by a year or two. A year or two, yeah. Okay, we can't say in our real estate selling career that we should have been with EXP because it didn't exist, so we can't say that.
I agree with you.
That's about where I'm at.
Yeah, I was going to say we should be traveling more, but it's not like we could have last year because of COVID.
Well, we're obviously making up for lost time on that.
We're binge traveling.
We've already gone at, what are we at, 2,500 miles on the car?
Yeah, 25. So we got the car with 80 miles on it, and we bought it new. It's an Audi AR6 or RS6 Avant. And if you guys don't know what that is, just Google it. It's an Audi RS6 Avant. It's pretty much the best barge meets F-35 fighter plane that I could ever possibly dream of having for a trip like this.
And it's comfortable. A lot of cars that try to be that are not that comfortable, but this has been pretty good.
I mean, I can make this an automotive podcast in 2 seconds, so be careful. But after we got to Blaine yesterday and we'd driven obviously a crap ton of miles in just the past couple weeks, I told Julie, you know what? I'm not burned out. This is not like, I was fearful that maybe I didn't have my driving mojo. I could do this. I could be a full-time,
because you drove in Puerto Rico for a year and a half.
Oh yeah, that's true. We're listening to great books too. Yeah, and we're having a great time sharing this experience with Zoe,
Definitely.
And we'll tell them about the books we're listening to.
Well, let's see. So far we've listened to 2 books. We just finished one yesterday by Neil Gaiman, the Graveyard Book, and Stardust, which are quite different from each other, but he's one of my favorite writers. And in fact, one of my goals is, because I'm always working on my writing, is to watch his masterclass on writing. I think
he does have one?
He does have one, and that's going to be really interesting, I think. He writes all different genres, and this is kind of like, it's going to sound goofy to some of our listeners, but it's almost like, you know how that you watch some shows and it's like the kids will find it interesting, but there's a deeper meaning if you're listening as an adult. Yeah. It's that kind of writing.
Well, it's also fiction, which a lot of people are like embarrassed to admit that they listen to or read. And
it's so freeing, though.
Yeah, you do. We do it intentionally because we want to essentially tickle different parts of our brains and our ways of thinking, because it causes you to be more creative.
Yes. It also makes your vocabulary better. Right. And all kinds of other things. So
but
it keeps Zoe's attention, so that's good too.
Those books have been fantastic. And yesterday, I guess we're circling around, or circling back. But yesterday we went to Roslyn, Washington.
Oh yes.
Which we'd been to.
I love Roslyn.
This was funny. I don't know if you guys. I know a lot of you do, because you guys are Generation Xers. We're meeting all of you, and it's like, Julie. It's like every time we go someplace, it's like most of the faces looking back are exactly our age, plus or minus 5 years. But you guys will all remember the show Northern Exposure. Now, Julie and I started dating in high school. We've been married for 30 years this year. And we have...
well, with the exception of some of our listeners who were actually born in the 90s, but we'll forgive you guys.
Yes, exactly. Well, we are we are in an admirable position in our lives, because we appeal to baby boomers, the people that are older than us, and we appeal to the people that are younger than us. We're relatable to both age groups. Which is nice.
It's great.
It is great.
Like, we have enough experience to be trustworthy, but we're not so out of.
And we're not full of shit. We've actually done it right at the highest level.
So back to Roslyn, Washington.
Go ahead.
Which is on the way up here. It's in the northwest. I guess you would say it's between Seattle and Blaine, or between Seattle and Vancouver. And it's up in the mountains. And, the show Northern Exposure was based on a town in Alaska, but this
called Sicily.
It's called Sicily.
So but they actually but they filmed it in Roslyn.
Yeah.
That's where they filmed. Awesome. That's where they filmed the show.
If you don't know about Northern Exposure, I'm sure there are episodes on YouTube, and there's also some really great quotes. So, that's
how many years was it on for? 15? It was on for a long damn time.
The best years were the first 5 years, and then they kind of expanded on it, maybe 10.
Yeah. Watch the first, if you want to really have something that'll be fun.
Ones.
Watch the early ones because they're so well written. Who is the writer for those?
David, I can't remember his name. He wrote for some other things back in the 80s and 90s, like what was the not Law and Order, but L.A. Law. I think he wrote some of those episodes. He had quite a career.
It was campy. If you guys remember, there was a film you know what? I didn't ask you. Are we going to go to where Harold and Maude was filmed?
I'm going to find it on the map, but probably. Yeah. I think it is up here, Northern California, isn't it?
There's another, totally.
Harold and Maude, they're going to totally think that we're nutballs.
Hippies. Yeah. Well, go watch another great thing to watch, and we really enjoy this, and we watched this originally in high school, is Harold and Maude. And I'm telling you guys, that is the ultimate camp movie you'll ever see. Yeah. But it's also done in such a dry, humorous way that you'll look at it and you'll not be able to look away. It's that good.
It is. It's one of those that every time you watch it, you notice, more and more depth to it.
I love that movie.
The first time they're going to be like, what?
But
remember, it's campy.
But that's like Northern Exposure, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So you want to just round the bend and talk about any other shows?
Oh, let's see. Do you like?
We're going to talk. I'm going to ask him a question about revenue share. Has the potential to create many millionaires, multimillionaires, and beyond within the EXP model. Did you think that would happen? I thought that would be a fun question. Yeah. Because here's the thing. That's what's happening with revenue share. And let's do round the bend on this point. Okay. So there was a report that came out, and guys, never, Julie and I are just your casual podcasters. We rarely have notes in front of us, well, other than, notes for the show. And so if I get any of these numbers wrong, forgive me. But here it is. So Keller Williams created the profit share model. EXP copied the concept of it, but they made it revenue share. Now, here's the distinct difference. And by the way, when I got this, then I knew we had to tell our coaching clients about it. So revenue share comes off the top. Profit share comes off the profit, which may or may not be there, as determined by the broker, right? So if you have, for example, if you're at Keller Williams, and if I get any of this wrong, guys, please just message me. I'm not doing it maliciously. But when you're at Keller Williams and you were to say, for example, sponsor an agent into Keller Williams, and that agent sells something, hypothetically, you're going to get a portion of that agent's transaction, however it's determined by their profit share model. But it's diluted because the profit is determined by the brokerage. So if the brokerage, for example, is not profitable, even though you were entitled to profit share, you're not going to get that profit share because it went to running the brokerage. Now, Glenn Sanford, and I think he basically had this epiphany when he was going through the doldrums of the housing crash, said, well, why don't we make this whole thing, the concept of revenue share, the concept of profit share is a fantastic idea for agents because, again, it cures the problem that most agents have, which is essentially never saving money and never being, financially secure. So he said, why don't we do it better? Instead of making it profit share, which can be diluted, why don't we make it revenue share that comes off the top? So using it, for example, if you have, you sponsor Bob, and Bob sells a house and gets a $10,000 commission, depending on, let's say you directly sponsored him, you're going to get, in that particular case, hundreds of dollars that you're going to be paid off Bob's transaction. Now, here's some interesting statistics. And again, if I'm getting any of these numbers wrong, it's not malicious, but at Keller Williams, there's been 6 people total that have earned it since, and I think it's about 30 years, have earned more than $1 million in total profit share. Again, if I'm getting this wrong, just tell me and I'll correct it, but I'm pretty sure that's right. So a total of 6 people that have earned more than $1 million in profit share. Pretty impressive in 30 years, right? I mean, there's a lot of other people that have made lesser amounts, but still, that's nothing to sneeze at, right? Well, last year alone, EXP shared $150 million in revenue share. That's because why? When the money comes in, the agent who sponsored the agent who earned the money is getting paid off the top, and there's no dilution of that money. Conceptually, that's how it works. So that means before the agent gets paid, now where's that money come from? It comes from the cap that the agent's paying in. So if that agent's paying in a $16,000 cap, which is what the EXP cap is, the revenue share, I trip over that too. The revenue share comes out of the cap. So it's not like the agent is getting a statement that says, well, this went to your cap and this went to Julie who sponsored you. No, it's all done through the company. So the company is in essence paying the sponsoring agent with the revenue that came from that agent's transaction, not in addition to.
That's right. So let me kind of clarify a little bit of this, because it can be some tangled up language, right? So the first point is that it's the company dollar. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is coming from agents. So by you sponsoring me or me sponsoring you, neither one of us are netting less in our commission check because of the sponsorship.
Correct. There's no tax on the sponsored agent because they have a sponsor. It doesn't work like so. If
so
you
shouldn't feel like, okay, so you sponsored me, and sometimes agents misconstrue and they go, well, gosh, why would I want that? You're going to make money off of me. It's not that. We're both paying into the company dollar. And we both benefit.
You're going to pay into your cap regardless. And if you have Julie as your sponsor, for example, the company's going to pay Julie. You're not paying Julie directly. The company's paying it out of the cap you would pay. You're going to pay regardless. That's the way it works.
Yes, you're not out anything because of the model.
And that is an interesting little micro point that sometimes trips people up.
Well, I've heard agents be like, "Well, why would I want that?"
It's
because they don't understand.
It's actually, Julie, what actually happens is that the very amiable types will say, "I don't want to sponsor anyone because I don't want them to think that the only reason I'm encouraging them to join EXP is because I want to make money off of them." That's what some agents say. And guys, the point is that you're making money off them, yes, but it's not coming out of that agent's pocket. That agent's not being punished for having you sponsor them.
EXP is paying you.
Right, EXP, and that's the whole revenue share model. Boom.
Yeah, but I think it's important to clarify this because there's a lot of misconstruing out there.
Well, intentional misconstruing by competitors that don't offer anything similar. And again, going back to why I think
muddying the waters.
This is the best brokerage model ever. Now, getting back to the question though, there are many that we know that are earning thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands per month. There are several that we know, maybe by the end of this year, there might be as many as 10 that are going to be earning, probably realistically, maybe 5. They're going to be earning over, are you listening, listeners? $1 million a month.
A month.
But there's
every month.
40% of all agents at EXP are getting some form of revenue share. In other words, 40% of all agents at EXP have sponsored somebody. Okay? So they're getting revenue share. So what you're seeing is in a relatively short period of time, 4 or 5, sometimes 3 years, you're seeing some of these agents who have, sponsored people, 2 or 3, 5, 10, 20 people. And then some of those people have 40% of those people have sponsored somebody. And then what happens is that those groups get really, really large. And the agent who originally said, well, you know what, I'm going to decide to become an EXP agent, and I know 5 people that I can probably get to join me, and I'm going to sponsor them. Well, what they don't realize is that one of those people that you just sponsored happens to know somebody in a different state or one of the different countries that EXP is operational in, and then they bring that person in, and that person then sponsors 300 people, and you're getting paid on all of those people. I'll give you guys a real good example. So when Julie and I joined EXP in December of 2019, most of the people, in our group, we did, like a vast majority of the people in our group we had never met before, didn't know. Even better, listen to this. Our group is responsible, or somebody in our group, I should say, is responsible for I don't know if it's been solidified yet, but essentially sponsoring the broker who's going to help initiate EXP in Israel, for example, in Colombia, in Panama, in Mexico, and all these other different countries. And these are people that Julie and I 2.5 years ago did not know. And they're now, because of their personal Rolodex, their center of influence and professional center of influence list, they then are having these connections and contacts, bringing those people into EXP, and all because Julie and I had we started our group, which is called Libertas. All of those people and all the transactions they do all over, every single agent that comes in, when they sell something, they pay EXP towards their cap, and a little portion of that is going to go towards Julie and I. And that's the way it's going to work for you guys as well when you come into EXP. And there's no dilution. So for example, Julie and I sponsor you, and you then sponsor other people. You're getting paid the exact same percent that we are. You're not losing money. You're not too late, in other words. When we talked about that in the previous question, where this company is in its phases of adoption, and really it's in the early, what is it called again? Early adopters phase. I mean, that's really where we are. So really what we're seeing is a sea change in the way that the broker-agent relationship works. That's never, ever happened before. Brokers love saying they're agent-centric, and like you and I used to get the number, probably 1, 2, or 3 question we'd get is which brokerage should I join?
Yes.
And before EXP, how would we answer the question?
Whichever one works for you, because it was basically all the same.
Exactly. And they were basically all the same. Whichever one takes the least amount of money out of your pocket and stays out of your hair,
Gives you
basically.
one.
Right, exactly. And we never gave, whatever. That was our answer. If you want to join that one, join that one. Join that one, join that one. But now it's EXP. And it does not matter what your market is, what your price range is, frankly, where in the world you are. It's EXP because of the added advantages that Glenn had the, frankly, genius to create inside this model.
Yes. Well, it's called fiscal responsibility to yourself and your family and your future children if you don't already have some. Okay. So I truly, from a coaching standpoint, running with you, a coaching organization who believes in facilitating the best for our agents and teaching them a model where you have not just 1 or 2 or 3, ways of making money within your real estate practice. This kind of falls into that bucket as far as I'm concerned, and not exposing them to what this really can offer for them. I've always felt would be really irresponsible for us as coaches and people who coach you to create passive income for yourself, and who coach you that it's not the commissions that make a difference to you, it's what you do with them. Okay, so that's how I really feel.
So I'm gonna address something. I know some of you are mad at us or feel like you want us to be non-denominational when it comes to brokerages, and we had been for decades with regards to answering the question, which brokerage should we go to? But we couldn't ethically or morally, or frankly financially, once we realized what EXP could do for our coaching clients. EXP is a natural extension for what our mission was as real estate coaches.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I understand. But here's the thing I want you guys to... I received a call this morning. I'm not going to mention names. A friend of ours who's in EXP who's doing exceedingly well. A few months ago, he earned $400,000 in a month. And he wanted to ask me a question about buying a house. And I won't get into the details. I love the guy. He's a friend of ours. Yeah, we've become really close to his family. Just great guy. And so I was asking him, he was asking me about spending a lot of money on a particular house and wanted to, he was nervous. It was a huge expense that he was considering. And so I asked him a few questions because I'm not just going to, I'm a coach.
I'm not going to shoot from
at my core. I'm not going to shoot from the hip. So I wanted to know what he was thinking. I just didn't want to tell him what, my, maybe not valid opinion given his variables. So I asked him what his perspective was on the economy. I asked him what his perspective was on his personal financial economy. I asked him what his perspective was, those types of things. I wanted to know what he was thinking. Mm-hmm. And then I asked him, well, what is your perspective on your personal economy, your income sources? And he said, solid, locked in, no worries. All right, good. That was an easy one. Then I asked him what his perspective was on the U.S. economy, to which then he tells me that his perspective was dour. He was not optimistic. He was looking at things from a perspective that there was going to be a whole bunch of foreclosures, but he was doing this without any actual factual information, but he had pretty much convinced himself of that. So here's what I said to him. I said, okay, so you've got your perspective. Now let me give you a different perspective. And then I'm not trying to persuade you to thinking a different way. I want you to take this added information and I want you to then put it in the blender and just basically think about it and then see what the question that you're seeking an answer for has a little bit more clarity. And so I told him what Julie and I know to be true, that there's not going to be any housing crash, that there's not going to be a bunch of foreclosures as a result of people coming off of forbearance, that there's not going to be all this doom and gloom crap that a lot of people are trying to monetize.
Factual stuff.
Right. And then Julie sent him some notes from one of our previous podcasts, of which you guys can seek out as well. Do you remember that podcast was called Why There's Not Going to Be a Housing Crash?
Yes.
Right. Or something to that effect.
Something to that effect.
Yeah.
It should be findable on the website.
And it's not just on timandjulieharris.com, but it's on Stitcher, Amazon, it's on Spotify, it's on iTunes. Listen to our past podcasts. This is the nation's #1 listened to daily podcast for real estate agents, after all. And so I said, I want you to then go and balance out your opinion with a countervailing opinion, and then see if you choose to be persuaded thinking a different way. Because the thing is that with his perspective, that there was going to be some sort of, dark cloud of zombie apocalypse with, locusts and everything in the housing economy and the economy on a whole. That was causing him to think a certain way that was preventing him to have clarity on his thinking to resolve his own question in essence. So I said, balance those things out. And soon as I gave him, a few little tidbits, and I asked Julie because she had it all memorized, a few different little tidbits. I said, how many, foreclosures are you hearing that, or do you anticipate? 1.4 million. And I said, well, this is what the actual number is based on these different sources, and it's, different unbiased sources, and this is what it's based. Blah, blah, blah.
It's currently running at less than 1.5%.
Right. So it's nothing. It's not going to be anything. And again, listen to what, and guys, listen, if we saw factual information that would persuade us the opposite direction, trust me.
You'd know about it.
We tell you, right? But the reality of it is he was dug in on this way of thinking that was causing him not to have clarity in his decision-making process, especially about this big financial and life decision. So I said, if you were to not believe that way, how would you proceed with this decision that you're trying to make? And instantly he had his answer. Now, see why am I bringing this up? Because that same process is relevant to you when you're thinking about EXP. So if you're listening to this podcast and listen to our other podcasts, and we try to, obviously we're on this U.S. tour and we're meeting with a lot of coaching clients who happen to be EXP agents, and coaching clients are going to become EXP agents. We're very much in in this world right now. But if you're listening to us and you're feeling in any way offended, if you're in any way saying this is not what I believe, I would encourage you to do yourself, the future version of you, right, a favor, and essentially look for information that would invalidate your current stance with regards to EXP Realty.
We did a podcast about that, by the way.
Of course.
Is it true? Is it absolutely true? Who are you right now because you believe what you believe?
Exactly. And, chances are, if you're in one of these small markets that Julie and I are blazing through on this U.S. tour, and there's like 4 EXP agents, you're going to probably have more skepticism than, say, for example, somebody in Dallas there's EXP agents everywhere, right? I get it. But the reality of it is it'd be similar to saying, that Amazon thing. What the hell's Amazon? This Jeff Bezos clown, he's selling a river, and I don't know, what the hell is it?
Who buys books online anyway?
Books. Good Lord. How many books do people need? Who cares if I can get a book the next day? I can go to Barnes and Noble.
That would be the skeptic.
Yeah, or yeah, exactly. Or what do you Blockbuster. I love going to Blockbuster, and what are you saying? Download video? That'll never work. Who's ever going to do that? Internet connect. I remember they were saying internet connection's too slow. That's never going to work. I remember that too. People are going to oops.
Yeah,
right?
No, good luck finding a Blockbuster.
And you can go even to you and I are paying attention to, though I still won't buy one, electric cars, especially in this part of the country. They are everywhere.
Yes.
I mean, you could, Teslas are the thing, and you see these it is funny going to some of these little dodgy towns and these dodgy gas stations, and you see this everything's covered with dust and it looks like it's fresh out of a 1970s Clint Eastwood movie. And then there's a charge freaking station that's sitting over there in the corner.
And it's not just one. There's like 7 ports.
I know. It's like, what the hell? It's because, I'm giving you an example. It's, it's clear that so many different facets of life are moving on. Do yourself a favor and don't just try to hold on to the old ways of doing things, no matter how old you are, because EXP right now is at the perfect position for you to maximize frankly, your financial and your, every other trajectory in your life, if you open your mind to it. And that's how I really feel about it, truthfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we're going to put the icing on the cake with your interview with Glenn this afternoon.
I'm obviously excited about it.
Yes, absolutely. I am too.
Yeah. So anything you're nervous about it?
It's always...
I know what you're nervous about.
What?
Well, we're going to be on his boat.
Yes.
And you're thinking it's going to be too cold.
Too cold and maybe too... I don't know if we're going out in the boat or just staying in the dock. We'll see.
We're flatlanders, and for the love of God, let's make sure that the boat, if offered, is staying moored.
Yes, well, we have our motion sickness bracelets being charged, and of course, I'm always concerned about our tiny savage behaving herself. But I think she'll find it novel. She loves to travel.
Will this be her first boat?
Other than things that she doesn't remember, like taking the little boat over to Disney, I think she was too young to really recall that.
And by boat, I think we're trying to tenderly say yacht.
I think at a certain point it's called a yacht.
So guys, listen, be optimistic, be excited. And I'll tell you, that's the big takeaway I've had from this trip so far. And we've got how many days left?
I don't even know. We're on week 3. I don't think we're quite halfway through yet.
And we're going to drive through California, and then we're going to drive back through Utah. We're definitely stopping in Iowa. We've got a lot of people to meet with in Iowa.
Yes. So where are we going next? 2 days in the Bellevue Redmond area here in Washington State. Then we're going to go somewhere
Oregon.
near Eugene area, and then down to the Redwood National Forest. That's the next several days. Beyond that, I don't know yet.
Yep, exactly. Which makes Julie very nervous because she's a planner.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah, doesn't like knowing we're going to sleep 3 days from now. But in the meantime, you guys have a fantastic day. We'll talk to you on the show tomorrow.
This program has been a presentation by Tim and Julie Harris, Real Estate Coaching. For more information on our real estate coaching and training programs, visit our website at timandjulieharris.com. Remember to tune in weekdays at noon for upcoming shows, and until next time, thank you for listening to Real Estate Coaching Radio with Tim and Julie Harris.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.